Hello, if you were looking for a scare tonight, you've come to the right place. I'll be narrating an hour's worth of creepy horror stories that I found off of Reddit. So without further ado,
These are their stories.
My father was a pretty easygoing person. He was always the fun dad who'd get my brother and I what we want from McDonald's or take us to the arcade downtown over the weekend. We'd play catch in the backyard and go hiking in the Green Mountains that always stood as the backdrop of my childhood. He was a very outgoing person and active in our small town community. He coached my baseball team and sometimes stood in as an assistant scoutmaster for our local troop, Troop 191. I looked up to him a lot, more than maybe most if I'm being honest with myself. Definitely more than my brother Sean. And now I look back at how my father was, especially during my most formative years, and I wonder how exactly he did it. He was the owner of a local security company. They'd set up cameras, alarms, the whole 9 yards. They also provided guards and watchman services. As far as I'm aware, these jobs were few and far between. It was fairly rare that any person or place really needed protection in Harmon. Our police force had a total of 5 members, and they were all part-timers other than the chief. What I didn't realize as a child was my father's company was farther reaching than Harmon's vague borders with the wilderness that surrounded it. They were contracted across the state, across New England sometimes. Again, most of this was alarm and camera security system work. Glorified electricians essentially, but they were good at what they did. The watchman positions only became available every once in a blue moon, and that was only because my father rarely took those jobs. He didn't even have dedicated employees for the work, simply hired freelancers looking for a quick buck, essentially watching cameras in an office for 8 hours a night. Things started to change after the recession, however. People didn't have the money to splurge on expensive security systems. My father knew we would struggle if he didn't make changes, and soon what was the outlying limb of his business became its core. People needed work, more and more properties were being neglected and abandoned, and my father saw that opportunity to capitalize on both. I remember he started coming home later than usual. Sometimes I didn't even see him until the next morning. Frankly, I was too young to really know what was going on. Sean might have been more aware, but I've never talked to him about it. As I grew up, I learned little bits and pieces of the night watchmen my father employed and the places they were hired to guard. He'd usually have some funny story to tell of the nightly reports he had come in. Sometimes there was nothing he'd tell me, however. When he got home, he'd simply drop his coat off in the mudroom and brush past my brother and I towards my mother with nothing but a shallow smile. I would watch my mother wrap her arms around him and they'd quietly walk into the next room, away from our prying ears and my prying eyes. As I grew older and all through high school, I was asked by many of my classmates if my dad could get them into one of the many properties which they surveyed. I'd always say no, of course. My father was very adamant about how dangerous those places were. He'd always say, "We aren't protecting the property from people, we are protecting people from the property." And anytime anybody I knew would try to make it past the watchman, they would end up in my father's office by the morning. Despite usually having known them since they were 5, Harmon was a small town after all. He never hesitated to let the police teach them a lesson. That included my best friend Devin, who lived 2 houses down from mine. Devin was probably one of the worst offenders if I'm being honest. I never dared join him on any of his expeditions, but once he got a car he was gone pretty much every single night. He was a smart kid, far more intelligent than the normal crowd that would break into any of the places my father's company surveyed. As a result, he got away with it. He wasn't there to trash the places though, just explore from what I was told. He'd show me pictures he took off his camera during lunch at school the next day, and to be honest, I didn't really understand the appeal. They just seemed like abandoned buildings, dirty, dusty, and probably dangerous. My father's words were still etched into my mind. Devin always defended his expeditions, however, despite the risks he took to achieve them. After high school, I honestly didn't know what to do with myself. I tried my hand at community college, but that didn't go far. Looked into the trades, but I'll be the first to admit I wasn't built for the blue-collar lifestyle. After 6 months or so in the spring of 2018, my father offered me a job. "Hey kiddo, can I come in?" he asked, knocking on my bedroom door. I swung around in my desk chair, pausing the game I was playing. "Yeah, of course," I replied with a bit of hesitation. I knew this conversation was coming. It had been months and I'd been stuck working at the local urgent care behind the front desk, a carryover from my short interest in pursuing medicine. It wasn't the most glorious work, and sometimes it certainly wasn't pretty, but I was comfortable there. He sat down on the bed across from me and folded his hands, letting out that sigh that always came before your parents said something you didn't want to hear. Adam, we need to talk about where you're going, he said plainly. What do you mean where I'm going? I mean where you're going, what you want to do with your life, college, career, anything at all. I hate seeing you just wasting your time here. He elaborated. Dad, I have a steady job. I'm just figuring out what I want to do, I said as sternly as I could muster. It was a weak attempt. You told me that back in the fall. It's May now, son. I gave you your time. Now I just can't watch you waste your time anymore, my father admitted. What are you trying to say? I asked with a bit of hesitance. I want to give you an opportunity, since clearly you aren't pursuing one yourself. He finally spit out, a job, working for me. Dad, no, I'm not. He quickly cut me off. Adam, listen, it's better pay than you're getting. Hell, it's better pay than your brother is going to get once he finishes school. It can be the start of a career for you, or at the very least, you can start saving some real money for the future. And it's easy work. You'll have plenty of time to figure out what you want to do. He tried selling me, even repeating my own words. I shut my eyes for a moment and exhaled. What's the job? I asked begrudgingly, knowing this was less of a choice than he was making it out to be. Night watchman, 5 days a week, 8 hours each day. I'll even let you pick your days off. I thought you didn't want me going to those places. Aren't they dangerous after all? I questioned, trying to use his words against him. He rolled his eyes. I know what you're doing, son, and you're not a kid anymore. Plus, you'll be there legally, not trespassing like your friends. I'd be handpicking your assignments anyways. I won't have you going. If I'm going to take this job, I don't want any special treatment, Dad, I argued. You offer me this job, I will go where you'd send any other watchman. He didn't respond for a moment, clearly not having a quick counter like he did for anything else I'd said up until that point. If that's what you want. He finally stumbled out, less assertive than before. His demeanor had completely changed in those few moments. Any confidence he conveyed had eroded severely. He looked at me with eyes that told me to fight the offer that he himself had just been arguing for, and I looked back at him with a new sense of cockiness, like I'd somehow beat him at his own game. I barely even thought about what I was doing. I knew my job was dead end anyway, so I didn't see much stake in keeping it. Maybe this was a smart idea. My father had always had my best interest in mind. He wouldn't have ever offered this to me if he thought I couldn't handle it. But then again, I had thrown in a term that he did not offer. I'll do it, I agreed simply, giving him a smile. He nodded silently, slowly rising from the bed and walking towards the door. Alright, I'll let you put your 2 weeks in then, I guess we'll get to work. Looking forward to it, Dad, I told him. He bit his lip, looking like he was holding back something as he shut the door behind him. I didn't think twice about it, more interested in returning to my game than my father's minute facial expressions. In my own defense, I was 19 and I was stupid. After I'd finished up at the urgent care, my father started me out shadowing one of his other watchmen. His name was George, an older man in his early 60s. He had bushy gray hair with a matching mustache and always wore a shirt and tie to the job, despite my father insisting to me that just a solid black shirt and pants would do fine. George took his job seriously, but he seemed happy to take me under his wing when my father explained the situation. I worked with George for 2 weeks, watching over the light bulb factory that had closed about 10 miles outside of Harmon. I remember people talking about it the first couple of years after it closed. Devin went a couple of times, but I guess the owners were tired of the place getting broken into and my father was the man to call. George explained all the odds and ends of the job, when to interfere, when to make the call to the police, and how to use the camera system in the security trailer. Admittedly, upon first impressions, this might have been the easiest job of my life. The first week, nothing happened, and I mean nothing. George started letting me lead the perimeter walks, camera setups, and system checks, but other than that, we sat in that little office all night long. It took a bit for George to start talking, but once he did, I barely got a word in. It made the nights fly by, the man telling me his life story night after night in almost chronological order. He had plenty of time after all, we weren't going anywhere. The second week I had my first encounter. I had graduated from leading perimeter walks to soloing them. George assured me he was watching me the whole time and we had walkies if anything went wrong. I wasn't too worried though, the place had been dead all of the last week, and this week was shaping up to be no different. I rounded the corner of one of the old brick buildings into a courtyard before stopping dead in my tracks. Through the open window on my left, I heard the crackle of broken glass and the shift shifting of dust over the concrete floor inside. My heart dropped for a moment before I tried to regain my composure, pulling out my flashlight and shining it through the window. "Is somebody in there? This is security," I said as seriously as I could pull together. I waited for a moment but got no response, not a sound. I let out a sigh, pulling out my radio. "Hey George, I think I've got someone inside building 5. I dispatched. You need a hand, kid?" he asked in a scratchy, gruff voice. I'm gonna check it out myself. I'll let you know, alright?" I decided, starting to walk towards the ajar door to the left of the window. Also, they've got to secure these doors. "I've been saying that for months. Alright, just watch yourself in there, Adam. Remember, these places can be dangerous," he advised. "I can be there in 2 minutes if you need." "Got it, will do." I answered quickly, clipping the radio back to my pocket and pulling open the old metal door. I stepped up to the factory floor and found the space completely void of movement, void of sound, void of life. It was dark, dank, and water pooled where the ceiling leaked. Old equipment was still bolted to the floor and made the vast space feel like a maze with only my flashlight to guide me. I called out again. "This is security. If you're in here, I'm gonna find you. This is private property and you're trespassing," I said, repeating another one of George's lines he taught me. My words echoed off the distant walls of the space, making me feel even more isolated and small. Despite it being a pleasant 65 outside, inside it couldn't have been higher than 40. I shivered as I stepped further into the moonlit space, surveying every nook and cranny I could find. A shiver went up my spine as I crossed into the next room. It might as well have been a clone of the last, but it felt noticeably different, colder and heavier, even more decayed. I heard the sound of the debris swishing under my feet as I walked. Dust, chipped paint, and glass crunched as I inspected the room, the same as the one before it. As I came to a stop and looked up at one of the massive pieces of machinery, I realized something was seriously wrong. While I was standing still, the sound of my footsteps kept going without me. And this wasn't an echo. That would have only lasted for a couple of seconds at most. This was clear, it was close, but slowly it sounded as if it were moving away. I stayed completely still, my heart pounding as I listened to the sound step around the machines, onto the catwalk with its distant metal clank, and back down to the factory floor on the other side of the room. Then it came to a standstill and the room returned to silence. I finally turned my head, my flashlight shaking in my hand as I crept around the corner, and there, standing at the far doorway into a long dark hallway, was the silhouette of a man. He stood completely still, almost like a cardboard cutout. I shined my light towards him, but the beam seemed to almost dissipate before it made it across the room. Despite what George had told me time and time again about confrontations, I had to admit I was terrified. As I slowly walked closer, I had to keep reminding myself that it's just a person. "Sir, you can't be here. This is private property," I stumbled out, completely failing to deliver an intimidating tone. I got no response from the man. His silhouette stayed exactly in its pose, standing almost inhumanely straight up. Even as I approached him, my flashlight's warm glow still wouldn't reach him. I tried whacking the battery compartment to get a little more juice out of the light, but all it did was kill the light completely. I tried to stay calm as the silhouette watched me from the doorway. I frantically tried sliding out the batteries and reinserting them, my eyes dashing between my hands and the silhouette. Screwing the cover back on, I flicked on the light to find the figure was gone. "Hey, stop screwing with me. We're gonna call the cops and you're going to be charged with trespassing," I warned in a futile state of panic. I turned around in circles, shining the light on any and every surface of the room. He hadn't gone far, he couldn't have. I didn't even hear his footsteps and it had only been a moment. I finally rested my eyes back in front of me and there, just as I'd left him, was the silhouette of the man. The flashlight did nothing to give the figure any details. He remained as dark and featureless as our surroundings. "What the?" I whispered through quivering lips, dropping the light to my side. Finally, for the first time since I'd laid my eyes on him, the silhouette of the man moved. His arm stretched stiffly towards the open door, like the muscles hadn't been used in years. His hand closed slowly into a fist and he began to knock against the metal. At first they were nonsensical, slow, and the sound of the metal interrupted the immense silence that filled the space between us. I stood completely stunned, frozen, and unable to move. I thought to turn and run, but I feared what would happen if I lost eye contact with the figure. I could feel my heart pounding as the knocks started to become more consistent, but still slow and intentional. The man let the sound play out before he'd go again, and the knocks became more aggressive and loud, almost unnaturally so. The sound seemed to bounce off the walls, surrounding me in a way that I couldn't explain. Then it came to a stop as quickly as it began. The arm lifted one last time and gently tapped the door in a familiar rhythm, the shave and a haircut. I watched it lower back to his side, just as jagged and stiff as it had raised. The figure's body then turned to face the open doorway to his right and slowly, almost robotically, walked through the door and out of my view. I quickly started to breathe freely again, my breaths long and labored. "Get your stuff together, Adam. Get this guy and call George," I whispered to myself as I hesitantly stepped forward. My slow walk quickly grew to a run as my fear mounted. The worst case scenarios and unknowns were building in my mind before I whipped around the corner the man had just stepped through. The room was small, with lines of shelves on either side and a small window towards the ceiling at the far end. Its safety glass was shattered, but the wire mesh kept it in place. The room was empty. Nothing disturbed, no footprints, no other way out than through the doorway I'd watched since he'd walked through it. Any sense of calm I had disintegrated almost immediately. My eyes danced from wall to wall, hoping somehow I'd missed the full-grown human that should have been standing right in front of me. My mouth fell agape as I stepped back slowly, almost dropping my flashlight with how much my hands were shaking. I grabbed the walkie from my pocket, admitting defeat as I was completely and unabashedly freaking out. "George, hey, it's Adam. I don't know what's going on, but this guy keeps disappearing and he was banging on the walls trying to freak me out. Can you give me a hand finding him?" I asked, my voice a stuttering mess as I tried to downplay exactly what I'd been experiencing. The line stayed static, my mentor's familiar gruff voice absent where it should have been. "Hey, you there?" I asked again after a few moments of static, and again I heard nothing. George, pick up the walkie," I ordered, feeling the panic swelling inside me, but George never answered. I looked in either direction, trying to find the nearest exit. In the darkness, I couldn't make out anything, and I tried to retrace my steps towards the door I'd entered through. My walk was slow, cautious, as I moved around the dusty assembly lines and heavy machinery. As I passed a row of dirty, fogged windows, a rush of wind whistled through the building, sending the trees outside swaying and loose debris inside flying. Tree branches smacked against the windows as I passed, making me jump back in fright. I was more on edge than I'd ever been before, and if I'd heard a pin drop, I imagine my ears would have caught it. I continued past the windows, barely making it a few feet before realizing that something wasn't right. While the wind had subsided, the branches kept hitting the windows. I swung my light around faster than I'd ever moved before, but it revealed nothing. The branches were completely still, yet the tapping continued. It was slow, purposeful, and I quickly understood its source wasn't something outside. I finally took off in a dash towards the next room, the soft taps of the window behind me turning into aggressive, loud bangs. The sounds bashed off of different materials, metal, brick, wood, anything that was available. I didn't dare look behind me as I tripped around the corner into the next room, but it followed me faster than I could run away. I could hear objects right beside me being pounded, smashed and tossed, shaking the floor beneath my feet. I saw the moonlight shining through the open doorway in front of me as I kept running as fast as I possibly could, the vigorous, angry violence behind me gaining closer and closer to my ears. I heard loud bangs against the brick wall beside me, so strong that the plaster began to crack and chip. I swung around the handrail and felt something knock my leg out from under me, twisting my ankle as I tumbled down the stairs and out onto the crumbling concrete. I didn't move for a moment, almost hoping that I could somehow play dead, but that thought didn't last long. I quickly pushed myself to my feet, feeling the throbbing pain in my ankle as I hobbled away from the doorway. I barely made it 5 feet before collapsing to the ground again, starting to cry as I rolled onto my back. I picked my head up and looked back at the factory building. Silence surrounded me as if nothing had happened. The leaves of the trees rustled quietly above, and that was all. In front of me, standing in the doorway I'd just come through, was the man, his black silhouette almost blending into the darkness behind him. I stared at him, frozen and helpless like a deer in headlights. He simply stood for what felt like hours before moving his arm to the metal door, just as he had back inside. He balled his hand and gave the door 2 solid, slow knocks. Then he turned and the black silhouette slipped back into the shadows. I walked in agonizing pain back to the security trailer, my entire leg throbbing in pain as I tried to move as quickly as I could. I kept trying to radio for George, but even outside, the walkie couldn't reach him. When the trailer came into view, something immediately seemed wrong. The lights inside were off. The flood lamp that was pointed down onto our security car had gone out as well. The place seemed lifeless and empty, just like the rest of the factory. Crap, I muttered under my breath as I hobbled up the stairs and through the door. The room was cold, dark, and almost devoid of sound. George's usual early morning radio show had been replaced with white static, and in the office chair, hand grasping his chest, was George. He was heaving heavily, his eyes terrified as they rolled over to meet my own. I nearly fell again as I hurried to his side. "George, what happened? I'm calling 911. It's going to be okay, I promise," I insisted, my months of working the front desk at an urgent care coming right back to me. I grabbed the phone off the desk and with trembling fingers dialed 911. I knew what I was looking at. I'd seen it more times than I'd like to admit. George was having a heart attack. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. Harmon Regional Hospital was only a few miles away, but it felt like a lifetime had passed as I tried to keep the man conscious. He never spoke, focusing all his efforts on breathing as I kept repeating over and over. We sat in the dark, with the sound of the radio static the only thing breaking the silence of the desolate property. Paramedics swung the door open, followed by the police, who quickly took over the scene. George was moved onto a stretcher, his almost limp body carried out of the room. The paramedics took us both to the hospital, the police giving me a ride in the back of their cruiser. "So, what happened to you, kid? You look like you just went through hell," the officer asked as we pulled out behind the ambulance. My face was slumped against the glass, watching the desolate factory slowly disappear behind the trees. I tripped down the stairs inside one of the buildings, twisted my ankle and fell on the pavement, I said softly. "Thought you guys don't go inside unless there's suspicion of trespassing," he recalled. "Yeah, I thought I heard something inside, but didn't find anyone. Probably was just an animal," I tried to say, the words barely able to trickle out of my mouth. "Right, guess you guys get a lot of that. Just so you know, if you think someone could be in there, we can investigate. I can have officers inside and—" "No," I insisted, a renewed energy in my voice. I couldn't imagine having any other soul enter that place, and I certainly wouldn't have it happen because of me. It was an animal. You don't need to have anyone go in there. Trust me." Alright, if you say so, kid, if you say so." I told my father the same thing when he and my mother made it to the hospital. My mom was just relieved I was alright. I looked worse than I really was, despite the cuts, bruises, and boot I got put on my foot for the next 2 weeks. My father looked at me differently, however. He was all smiles, glad I was safe, and said he was sorry I had to go through the whole ordeal. But there was something else in his eyes I couldn't quite place. Mannerisms that didn't quite match. I didn't really understand it, and at the moment I didn't really care to, but I do now. I was back on the job after the boot came off. My dad got one of his other guys to cover the factory with George out of commission. He lived through the heart attack, but never went back to work at that factory. He never told a soul what happened in the time he was alone either, and I did the same. Not until right now. I worked for my father's company for a year and a half, and there are many things that I never understood about what would happen on that job, long after the knocker, as I started to call him. But whatever happened always stayed there, and I didn't. Now I'm happy to say I don't have to work the nights. I don't even work in security. I live with my girlfriend Emma 2 states away, and I've been happy. Money is good, relationship is good, life is good. My time working as a watchman doesn't even cross my mind. It's always been covered up by something better. But last night I woke up in the middle of the night. Emma was still asleep, her dirty blonde hair having fallen over her face as she slept facing me. I couldn't help but smile. She always looked funny when she slept. I stretched a little under the covers as I adjusted and got ready to shut my eyes again. I let out a long breath before settling in again, rolling over and shutting my eyes. But just as quickly as they shut, they were quickly wide open again. I heard a knock on the glass, and then another, and then more. They were delicate but purposeful, almost rhythmic. It lasted almost 10 minutes and ended in the same way, a shave and a haircut. I've spent the entire day today trying to figure out what caused it. Wasted my entire Sunday. I tore the house apart and checked every inch of the exterior, every bush, every tree, anything that could reproduce the knock, but it was a dead end at every turn. In the back of my mind, I knew I was simply delaying the answer I already knew was right. Emma thinks I'm going crazy trying to find the source of a knock that wasn't even loud enough to wake her up, but she doesn't understand and I don't intend to explain it to her. Not yet anyway. I'm afraid to go to sleep tonight. I don't know what will happen. Maybe nothing, maybe the same thing, maybe something worse. The unknown worries me because the knocker isn't the worst thing I encountered on that job. And as much as he terrifies me, there are much bigger fish in the sea. It all started last week on a quiet evening when I was scrolling through my phone. My storage was full, so I began the tedious task of deleting old photos. But then something caught my eye. A photo album titled Sleep Well, one I didn't remember creating, appeared on the screen. The creation date was from the night before, just hours earlier. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I opened it. Inside was a picture of me taken while I slept, vulnerable, unaware. The angle of the shot was disturbingly specific, as if the photographer had been hiding just out of view. Their presence felt only in the eerie stillness of the moment. The most disturbing detail: the picture was taken from inside my closet. I live alone. My heart dropped. I could feel the color draining from my face as a heavy pressure squeezed my chest. I was being watched. My eyes instantly darted toward the closet. As I trembled in fear, I wondered, was someone inside it? I don't know. I was too scared to look. In a panic, I immediately grabbed my car keys from beside the bed, rushed to the front door, and drove straight to the police. I arrived at the police station, feeling a strange sense of relief just for making it there. I told them everything that happened and showed the picture. The officers listened, then agreed to send someone to search my house. They searched every inch: closets, drawers, windows, nothing. No signs of break-ins, no clues that anyone had been there. The police told me to change my locks, install security cameras, and keep in touch in case something else happened, but it didn't feel like enough. I was terrified. The idea of someone watching me, of someone being inside my closet, haunted me. That night, I opened the closet fully, convinced that if I could see inside, I could rid myself of the fear. But something felt off. I could still feel the presence, like someone was right there, just beyond my sight. The weight of paranoia suffocated me. Unable to sleep, I went to the kitchen to make something to eat. I called my friend Melissa and told her what happened. With my voice shaking, I made myself some popcorn and went back upstairs to my room. Still talking to her, trying to sound calm, I noticed something wrong. I stopped mid-sentence. My breath hitched. The closet door that I had left wide open was now closed, but not fully. There was a slight gap, a narrow sliver, just enough for me to know that someone or something was inside. I couldn't see who or what, but I could feel it. The pressure of being watched. My eyes locked on the gap, heart hammering in my chest. Then I saw it. A single wide eye staring back at me from the darkness. My voice trembled as I spoke. "Hello, are you still there?" Melissa asked, confused by my sudden silence. I couldn't answer. My body was frozen. Someone was inside the closet. I was sure of it. I slowly pulled my bedroom door shut, my hands shaking as I gripped the doorknob. I locked it. Then, with my heart racing, I ran outside and called the police as I stood in my yard, too terrified to go back in. When the officer arrived, I rushed to explain. I locked them in my room, I swear. They're in the closet. They were watching me. The officers moved quickly, their hands steady, trained. They entered my room, opened the closet door, and nothing, no one. The closet was empty. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. The room was on the second floor with windows secured by metal bars. No exit, no secret passage. The officer returned to me, his face tight with frustration, his politeness wearing thin. "Ma'am, I know you're scared, but you can't call us every time you forget you closed your closet door. Be sure to only call us when you're certain it's an emergency. I suggest you sleep somewhere else until you've recovered from this panic." "What, are you sure you searched everything?" "They must have escaped," I said, my voice trembling with remorse and disbelief. I felt the walls closing in. How could they have missed something? How could they not see it? "As I said, the house is empty," the officer replied, his tone cold and dismissive. I felt my frustration growing. This wasn't right. There was someone there. I couldn't shake the feeling, the cold certainty gnawing at me. No, you have to believe me. There was someone in there. I locked the door, I swear. There's no way they could have gone anywhere. My house is locked down. Please search again," I insisted, my voice rising in desperation. The officer gave me a long look, clearly fed up. "Ma'am, we've been over this. The house is empty. Nothing's here. I suggest you take a step back and calm down. We can't keep coming back every time you think someone's in your closet." His words hit me like a slap, each one a cold dismissal of everything I had experienced. I stared at him, fighting to hold back tears. But I saw them. I saw their eye. "Get some rest," he cut me off, turning on his heel. "We're done here." Reluctantly, I followed the officer's advice and went to sleep at Melissa's house. She's my best friend, and being with her felt like the only place I could be safe, at least for that night. Melissa tried to lighten the mood, but I could hear the nervousness in her voice. "Are you sure this picture isn't just some joke from someone messing with your head?" I forced a weak laugh, but it was hollow. "Number, I'm sure about what I saw. There's someone watching me." I didn't want to talk much. My mind was racing, but the words wouldn't come. from. I hadn't been able to explain it properly to the police, and now I couldn't explain it to her. The fear was too real. Melissa's husband was out of town, so I ended up sleeping next to her. I was too scared to sleep alone. That night, I finally felt a little safer, a little less alone. The next morning, things felt better. Being with my closest friend gave me a sense of comfort. I ate breakfast, tried to distract myself, but there was one thing I couldn't shake. The picture. I had to know. I had to see it again. Melissa asked, "Can you show me the picture again?" I didn't want to look at it, but I opened my gallery anyway. I could feel my heart thudding in my chest. I stared at the album for a moment before clicking on it. My stomach dropped. There was another picture in the album, a new one. I zoomed in. I couldn't believe it. It was a picture of me, but this time I wasn't alone. Melissa was lying beside me, just like the night before, but the perspective was wrong. It was too close. Whoever took the picture was right next to us, and in their hand they were holding something, a rag doll. The doll looked just like me, the same dark hair, the same clothes, the exact same features. Even the expression on its face mirrored mine. The doll was lying in the same position I was, as if it had been placed there beside me, sleeping. In the background I saw the shadow of who took the picture. My heart stopped. My hand shook as I dropped the phone. The safety I had felt with Melissa was gone. All that comfort I had wrapped myself in vanished, replaced with a cold, suffocating fear. I wasn't safe. I wasn't safe anywhere. Melissa tried to calm me down, but it wasn't working. My panic was too overwhelming, and she could see that I was shaking, unable to catch my breath. Desperate to understand what was happening, she quickly reached down and grabbed my phone from the floor. Her fingers trembled as she opened the photo album, her eyes scanning the picture I had just shown her. Okay, this doesn't make any sense," she muttered, her voice tight with confusion. She looked at me, then back at the photo. Her brow furrowed as she tried to make sense of it, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Are you sure this isn't just some sick prank? Something someone's been sending you? Maybe an ex or someone you know?" I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. "No, Melissa, I swear, it's not a prank. This is real. Someone's in my life, and they're watching me." Her expression faltered for a moment, and I saw her hesitate, her eyes darting nervously around the room as if she could feel the weight of something watching her too. Slowly, she handed the phone back to me, but this time I noticed her hand was shaking. "Do you think they could be here too, in my house?" she asked quietly, her voice laced with a hint of fear. I swallowed hard, my own breath catching in my throat. I don't know, but I don't feel safe anymore. I don't think I'm safe anywhere." Melissa's eyes widened slightly, and she stood up from the bed looking around the room. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I don't know. I heard some noises last night, but I thought it was just the house settling. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to worry you." The fear in her eyes mirrored my own. For the first time, I realized I wasn't the only one feeling watched. I think we need to check the house just in case," she said, her voice trembling as she grabbed her phone, preparing to call someone for help. Her eyes were wide, her body tense, as she waited for my response. Melissa looked at me, her face pale with concern. "We need to go to the police," she said, her voice firm despite the obvious fear in her eyes. "You can't keep dealing with this alone. If someone's really doing this to you, they need to know." I shook my head, a knot of anxiety forming in my chest. "The police won't believe me, Melissa. I've already been there. They searched my house and found nothing. They said I'm just imagining things. They don't take me seriously." Melissa's face softened, but her voice remained steady as she reached for my hand. "Number. This time it's different. We have proof, remember?" She looked at the photo on my phone, her eyes scanning it once more before locking with mine. "They can't just ignore that." I hesitated. The memory of the police officer dismissing me echoed in my mind, but Melissa was right. We had proof, and I couldn't just let this go. "All right," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "But if they don't believe me again, we'll make them believe you," she said, determination in her tone. "We'll show them the photo, everything. We have to do something." I arrived at the police station feeling a mix of dread and urgency. As soon as I walked in, I saw the same officer from the night before. When he saw me, his face immediately twisted into a scowl. He was not happy to see me again. He didn't even bother to greet me. "You again," he muttered under his breath, rolling his eyes. "Officer, we need your help," I started, holding my phone up with the picture. "Please, I'm telling you, someone's been taking pictures of me while I sleep." He glanced at the photo, his patience already running thin. "You're still going on about this?" He rubbed his forehead, clearly annoyed. annoyed. I already told you, there's no sign of a break-in, no evidence of anyone being inside your house. What do you want me to do? Investigate every closet in the city? I could feel the knot of fear tightening in my chest as I desperately tried to explain. But you don't understand this picture, it's not just a prank. Someone's still watching me. Melissa, who had been silent until now, spoke up. We don't have any more evidence, but we've checked everything. The house is empty, but she's still seeing things. This picture... The officer cut her off with a harsh wave of his hand. Enough with the photo, he snapped, clearly not believing either of us. I've already done my part. If you two are gonna waste my time, I suggest you find another way to deal with this. He took a deep breath, then sighed in frustration, clearly not wanting to deal with this anymore. Alright, he said, I'll go to your place and search your house again, but don't expect me to find anything. The officer came with us, walking into Melissa's house like it was just another job. He searched every room with annoyance, even though we had already checked everything ourselves. We stood in the living room, the tension growing as we waited for him to come out. When he finally emerged from the last room, his face was contorted with anger. There's nothing here, he said sharply. No sign of a break-in. No one's been here, so stop wasting my time. I couldn't hold it in anymore. But the closet, someone was in there. They're still watching me. Please, you have to understand, I'm not making this up. He shot me an angry look, his voice turning cold. I've been through your house and I haven't found a damn thing. You really think I've got time for some prank, some sick joke? You two think this is funny? Melissa and I exchanged a look, both of us trying to process the officer's words. My heart sank as I realized the officer was done taking us seriously. This is ridiculous, he said, his voice laced with frustration. I'm not going to keep playing along with this. No more emergency calls. You two should find a way to get some rest instead of dragging me into your delusions. He turned and walked toward the door, leaving us standing in the middle of the room, shocked and speechless. The door slammed behind him with a finality that made my whole body tense up. Melissa just stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. Silence. Complete silence filled the room as Melissa and I stood there in disbelief. I need to go home. It's watching me, not you. Me being here is just putting you in danger, I said with my eyes welling up with tears. Are you crazy? I'm not letting you go anywhere until we catch this person. You're my best friend, I love you, and I'll go through hell to help you, Melissa said, hugging me tightly. Her words were comforting, but fear still consumed me. I honestly didn't know what I would do without her. I'm not sleeping tonight, I said, my voice firm. But remember, you have work tomorrow, Melissa reminded me. Work. How could I possibly work and pretend like nothing happened after everything I'd experienced? The fear was slowly turning into anger. I spent the whole day thinking about what happened, feeling like I was being watched everywhere I went. Melissa called her boss and told him she was sick so she could stay with me. I love her. We spent the entire day coming up with theories about what was going on. Maybe whatever was watching me wasn't human. Nah, I don't believe in supernatural stuff, but Melissa kept insisting. Nighttime came. As I said, I refused to sleep. Even if I wanted to, I don't think I could. But Melissa couldn't stay awake for long. I felt exposed with her asleep, but I wasn't about to wake her up. I just had to stay awake, and that's exactly what I did. Hours passed and nothing happened. The only thing I could hear was Melissa's soft snoring. But time felt agonizingly slow and my fear only grew. 3 a.m., the so-called haunted hour that makes both adults and children alike dread what might happen next. Even though I didn't believe in supernatural things, when I saw 3 o'clock on the clock, my heart sank. I was expecting something, some noise, a reflection, a doll, or the most disturbing thing I could imagine. But nothing happened. 20 minutes went by and I started to feel extremely sleepy, but I knew as soon as I slept, I wouldn't be safe anymore. I glanced at Melissa. Something felt off. She wasn't snoring anymore. She had turned to the other side and I could only see her brown hair splayed across the pillow. I froze. Something about her posture made me uneasy. I had never seen her sleep like that before. Slowly I sat up, my heart racing in my chest. I lifted my head and cautiously leaned forward to see if she was awake, but when I looked, my blood ran cold. What I saw was not my best friend anymore. There in front of me was a body. The skin was unnaturally pale, the once vibrant brown hair now a tangled mess. Her mouth hung slightly open and her eyes, those eyes that I knew so well, were wide open but lifeless, glazed over with an unsettling emptiness. The way her limbs were arranged, twisted unnaturally at odd angles, told me she hadn't just fallen asleep. Number remember something had happened to her. I wanted to scream. My throat closed up. I reached out and desperately shook her, calling her name, trying to wake her, but there was no response. Her body was cold, stiff. I tried again, harder this time. Nothing. No breath, no movement. Melissa was dead. Panic surged through my veins, my vision blurry with tears. I fumbled for my phone, trying to dial emergency services, but just as my fingers brushed the screen, something stopped me. An airdrop request flashed across the top of my phone. My heart dropped. I hesitated, staring at the screen, the dread tightening in my chest. I wanted to deny the request, to throw my phone away, to make it all stop, but I couldn't. My mind screamed at me to say no, but my hand moved on its own. I accepted. A flood of pictures appeared on my phone, and my stomach twisted. The images were of me, sleeping, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, scattered over weeks. Some were taken inside my closet, others were shots of me lying in my bed, blissfully unaware. But what made my blood run even colder were the ones that came after. There was a picture of me sleeping beside something on the bed. It looked like the same doll I had seen before, but this time it felt different, wrong. It wasn't just a doll anymore. It was me, or something that had been made to look like me, in doll form, lying beside me. The most disturbing part, the shadow of someone standing just behind it, watching, waiting. I couldn't move. The air around me grew thick, suffocating, and then, through the crack in the door, I saw it. A figure, tall and unnervingly still. It was standing there as if waiting, watching. But the most terrifying part was the eye. That single wide eye staring directly at me from the shadows. It was unnatural, too large, too black. No light reflected off of it. It was like a hole in the world, a deep, endless void that seemed to pull every ounce of warmth and life from the room. The eye twitched just slightly, as if it recognized me, like it had been waiting for me to look. And in its other hand, the doll. But it wasn't just any doll. The doll was me. I recognized the face immediately, its pale skin, the dark hair, the same expression I often wore when I slept. But it was wrong. The doll's eyes were wide open, fixed in a grotesque stare, its mouth frozen in a twisted, silent scream. Its body, rigid and contorted in a way that a human body never could be, seemed to mock me, like an unnatural imitation of myself. The figure held it with such tenderness, as if cradling it, but there was something deeply disturbing in the way it did. The doll's hand was positioned just like mine when I slept, but there was no softness to it, no warmth. And then, the figure stepped forward, the eye never leaving mine. The room grew colder and the figure moved silently, like a shadow creeping closer, carrying the doll as if it were the most precious thing in the world. I felt the terror clawing at me, suffocating me, but I couldn't look away from that horrible, hollow eye. It was as if it was looking through me, and the more I stared, the more I felt like I was becoming part of its dark, empty world. I could feel my body shutting down, my heart thundering in my chest as if it was trying to escape my ribs. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, my breathing shallow and erratic. My limbs felt weak, like they were made of stone, and my vision started to blur around the edges. The air felt like it was closing in, pressing against me from all sides, and the figure, the eye, was all I could see. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, louder and louder, drowning everything else out until the sound was all-consuming. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, everything went black. I'm currently writing this on a contraband cell phone in prison, after allegedly poisoning my best friend. It's all a lie, of course. They say I did it, but they don't understand. They don't know what I saw, what really happened. Melissa is gone. I can still feel the weight of that truth crushing me. I can still hear her laugh, see her smile, feel her presence beside me like I always did. I feel the coldness now. It's unbearable. Losing her, it's like losing a part of myself. The world feels hollow, like it's spinning around me without any meaning. The grief is suffocating, but the worst part isn't the grief, it's the frustration, the anger bubbling inside me. They think I did it, they think I'm the one who poisoned her. They don't see how broken I am, how lost I feel. They don't understand that I would never hurt her. I would never do something like that, but it doesn't matter what I say. They have their own version of the truth, and now they've locked me away for something I didn't do. They'll never know what really happened. They'll never know what I saw in that room, what I saw in her eyes before everything turned dark. I couldn't escape before. before. Now, I certainly can't. They've got me here in this cold metal cage, but maybe I can. There's still one thing I can do. I'm the only one who could put an end to this, to everything. The figure is still watching me, I can feel it. That same eye, always lurking, always waiting. It's still out there haunting me. I thought maybe, just maybe, being locked up would give me a break from the constant fear, but no, it follows me. It's always watching. I don't know how long I can keep going, how long I can pretend that I'm okay. I can't take it anymore. The nightmares, the paranoia, the guilt, they all blur together. I miss Melissa. I miss her so much. I love you, Melissa. I always will. I can't wait to join you. I need to write this down. I don't know if it's for my own sanity or as some kind of warning, maybe both. Typing helps ground me, makes the shaking in my hands a little less noticeable. The doctors keep telling me I'm experiencing a psychotic break, but the puncture wounds on my back and the darkening birthmark on my palm tell a different story. My dad turned 63 yesterday. We always throw him a party at his house, the same house I grew up in. It's tradition. This year, something changed, something that had been waiting precisely 63 years. Family traditions are just rituals we don't question. That's what Dad always said whenever I asked why we had to keep doing the same things year after year. His eyes would always drift away when he said it, like he was remembering something he'd rather forget. Dad wasn't always this cryptic. Before Mom vanished, he was different, warmer, more present. We used to fish together on weekends, his calloused hands patiently untangling my line when I'd snarl it. Those hands would tremble slightly whenever his birthday approached, though I didn't understand why until now. After Mom disappeared, fishing stopped. The only constant that remained was his insistence on the birthday ritual. Always on the exact day, never postponed, never altered. Even when I was finishing my master's thesis, even when he was recovering from pneumonia 3 years ago, the party had to happen exactly as it always had. The house itself sits back from the road, nestled in about 5 acres of dense woods, lush and green in the spring, blazing with color in the fall, but somehow always holding shadows deeper than they should be. After Mom vanished, I'd sometimes catch Dad staring out at those woods at dusk, whispering something under his breath. Once, I crept close enough to hear him counting backward from 63. When I'd ask what he was doing, he'd just say, "Keeping track of what's mine." I thought he meant the property. Dad's lived alone since Mom passed 10 years ago. At least that's what we tell people. The truth about Mom's disappearance is something Dad and I never discuss. Just like we never discuss the strange hourglass-shaped birthmark we both share on our left palms, or the fact that neither of us can remember anything about the night she vanished except the smell of ozone and damp earth, and the sound like wet leather being stretched over wooden frames. Sometimes I still hear it in my dreams, that sound, followed by Mom's scream cutting abruptly to silence. The police found one of Mom's shoes by the edge of the woods, just one. It was perfectly clean despite the mud all around it. When they brought cadaver dogs, the animals refused to enter the tree line, whimpering and backing away. One dog, a German Shepherd with an impeccable record, bit his handler when the man tried to force him forward. The search was called off after 3 days. Dad never cried, not once. He just sat in his armchair, rubbing that hourglass mark, staring at nothing. Dad's a creature of habit, and the birthday party is one of the few constants he clings to. Same small group of friends, mostly colleagues from the dusty archives where he worked before retiring. Same Jell-O salad recipe Mom used to make, same slightly off-key rendition of Happy Birthday. I always thought Dad was just honoring Mom's memory with these parties. The familiarity seemed to comfort him. Now I understand it was never celebration, it was obligation. Last week I called Dad to confirm the party details. The conversation was ordinary until I mentioned bringing my new girlfriend Eliza. "No," he said sharply, a panic in his voice I'd never heard before. "No new people, not this year." "Why not? Is everything okay?" His breathing was heavy on the line. "This is a difficult one, son. The 63rd. Best to keep it traditional." What's special about 63? I asked. The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, he said, "That's how many they need." When I pressed him, he changed the subject, voice resuming its normal cadence as if the moment of strangeness had never happened. "I didn't invite Eliza. I got there around 6 p.m. on the day of the party. The gravel crunched under my tires like usual, but something felt different. The trees seemed to bend inward, watching, listening. Strings of faded party lights were draped across the porch railings, buzzing with an unnatural persistence, like insects speaking in code. When I killed the engine, the silence that rushed in felt hungry. Before going inside, I noticed something odd. The wind chimes Mom had hung years ago were perfectly still, despite the breeze I could feel on my skin. I touched one. It was ice cold and made no sound, as if it were frozen in time or existing in some different medium than the air around it. Inside, the usual suspects were already mingling. Mr. Henderson, Dad's old boss, looking even more like a bewildered owl than usual. Mrs. Gable from next door, clutching her ubiquitous Tupperware container. A few others whose names always escape me, but whose faces are etched into the memory of dozens of these parties. As I shook hands with each guest, I realized something that sent ice through my veins. Each year they look exactly the same, not just similar, but identical. I realized with a chill that Mrs. Gable's dress was the exact same one she'd worn to every birthday since I was 15. The small coffee stain on the left sleeve hadn't changed, hadn't faded. It was precisely the same stain. The amber necklace she wore caught the light in the same way, reflecting the same pattern on her collarbone. For a decade, she hadn't aged a day. Dad seemed fine at first, maybe a little tired, but he greeted me with his usual warm hug, smelling faintly of pipe tobacco and old paper. He was wearing the slightly too loud Hawaiian shirt I got him last year. Everything felt normal. The low murmur of conversation, the clinking of ice in glasses, the smell of roast beef warming in the oven. But beneath it all was something wrong, a discord like music played at the wrong speed. When Dad hugged me, his arms held on a beat too long, his fingers pressing into the spot where my spine meets my neck, as if counting the vertebrae. I pulled away, and for a second, just a flash, his eyes seemed completely black before returning to their familiar hazel. The first crack in the facade was small. I was getting a drink in the kitchen when Mr. Henderson came up beside me. He didn't say hello, just leaned slightly towards the refrigerator, his eyes fixed on the magnets holding up my childhood drawings. I noticed with unease that one drawing, a crayon scribble I'd made at age 6, depicted tall, thin figures standing in a circle around a smaller figure. I didn't remember drawing it. The crayon marks seemed to shimmer slightly, as if freshly applied. "The cycle nears completion," he whispered, his voice dry like rustling leaves. "Your father has served well, but the vessel weakens." I forced a laugh, my throat suddenly tight. "What cycle's that, Mr. Henderson? Getting Dad another year older?" He didn't smile. He just slowly turned his head, his owlish eyes seeming too large behind his thick glasses, pupils contracting to pinpricks despite the dim light. The lineage must continue. The hunger must be fed. A memory surfaced. I was 7, hiding in the hallway past my bedtime, watching Dad and Mr. Henderson bent over old maps spread across the dining table. "The confluence occurs every 63 years, Henderson had said. "That's when the door thins. That's when payment is easiest." Dad had nodded gravely, his finger tracing something on the map I couldn't see. In the memory, Henderson had turned suddenly, looking directly at my hiding place, though I was certain I'd been silent. "The boy already shows the mark," he'd said, "stronger than yours was at his age." Dad had glanced up, his face drawn with a sorrow I couldn't comprehend then. "He won't bear it," Dad had answered firmly. "I'll find another way." Now Henderson straightened up, grabbed a napkin, and walked back into the living room as if nothing had happened, but not before I caught the faintest flicker of something insectile moving beneath the skin of his neck. I reached for my phone to call someone, who I wasn't sure, when I noticed the childhood drawings on the fridge were different. Where had been stick figures and houses, now showed dark, spindly shapes with too many limbs. One showed a crude black candle with a purple flame. Another showed an hourglass with what looked like a tiny figure trapped in each bulb, their mouths open in silent screams. I glanced at my palm, where the hourglass mark seemed darker than usual. I've had it since birth. Dad told me once it meant I was a keeper of time. Mom didn't have one. I remember asking her why when I was small, and she'd looked at Dad with such sadness before answering, "Because I'm not part of the line, sweetheart. I'm just a visitor." Then she'd hugged me so tightly it hurt, whispering into my hair, "But I'd rewrite time itself to keep you safe." Mrs. Gable, setting down her jello salad, lime green as always, caught my eye and gave me this wide, unblinking stare. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It felt stretched, painted on. She held my gaze for an uncomfortably long moment before turning away with a jerky movement that reminded me of stop-motion animation. The jello didn't wobble as she set it down. It remained perfectly still, as if frozen solid, or as if the laws of physics simply didn't apply to it. As more guests arrived, the same faces Dad had known for decades, the atmosphere grew heavy heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. They greeted Dad with a strange formality, their handshakes lingering, their fingers tracing the hourglass mark on his palm. Their eyes scanned him up and down with an unnerving intensity, like butchers assessing a prime cut. They barely spoke to each other, arranging themselves around the living room in a loose semicircle facing the armchair where Dad usually sat to open presents. They just stood there, waiting. "Dad," I whispered, catching him alone by the hallway. "Something's wrong. These people..." "Not people," he corrected quietly, his eyes darting around the room. For a moment he looked terrified. "Never were. I'm sorry, son. I tried to keep you away from all this. Your mother and I both did. She thought if she..." He stopped abruptly as Mrs. Gable approached. "It's time for cake, Arthur," she trilled, her voice hitting notes that made my teeth ache. Dad nodded, defeated. "Yes, time for cake." The usual cheerful chatter died down. The only sounds were the buzz of the porch lights and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. A clock I suddenly realized I hadn't heard chime all evening. Looking closer, I saw the hands weren't moving. Hadn't moved for years based on the dust accumulated on them. Yet the ticking continued, growing louder, more insistent, like a heartbeat accelerating with fear. Dad, caught in the center of their silent attention, started looking uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair, tugging at the collar of his Hawaiian shirt. "Well," he said, his voice a little too loud in the quiet room, "anyone want to hear about the new bird feeder I put up?" Nobody responded. Their eyes remained fixed on him. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat softly. "Arthur," he said, his voice regaining that dry, papery quality. "It is time." Dad swallowed hard. He looked at me, a flicker of something, horror, resignation, relief, in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by a weary acceptance that was somehow more frightening than fear. He nodded slowly. Yes, I suppose it is." He glanced at me. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought I could spare you this. I tried to break the cycle when your mother..." His voice trailed off. A memory hit me like a physical blow. Mom and Dad arguing the night before her disappearance. Mom's voice rising hysterically. "I won't let them have him. You promised we could end this." Dad's response eerily calm. "There is no ending it. Only continuing or transferring. That was the bargain." Mom had slammed her palm against the wall. "Your grandfather's bargain, not yours, not our son's." Dad's face had hardened. "Do you think I wouldn't break it if I could? The door must have a keeper. If not me, then let it be me," Mom had said, her voice suddenly quiet, resolved. "I've found another way." This wasn't part of the birthday tradition, or maybe it was the only true tradition, hidden beneath the veneer of normal celebration all these years. Mrs. Gable stepped forward, carrying not her jello salad, but a small, ornate wooden box I'd never seen before. No, that wasn't true. I had seen it once in the attic when I was 7. Dad had caught me looking at it and forbidden me from ever going into the attic again. The box was carved with symbols that hurt my eyes to look at directly, patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed peripherally. She placed it on the coffee table in front of Dad. The other guests leaned in slightly, a collective intake of breath that sounded like wind through dry reeds. "What's going on, Dad?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "What is this?" He wouldn't look at me. Just part of getting older, son. Some things you have to accept." He rubbed his hourglass birthmark absently. "Some bargains can't be broken." I felt a sudden stabbing pain in my own palm, looked down to see my birthmark darkening, the edges growing more defined, throbbing in time with my racing heart. Black veins began spiderwebbing outward from it, disappearing beneath my sleeve. The pain was sharp, electric, climbing up my arm like invasive vines. Mr. Henderson gestured towards the box. "Open it, Arthur. Fulfill the pact. Begin the transition. 63 years is complete. The door awaits its keeper." Pact, transition. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This felt wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. These weren't Dad's friends. They looked like them, sounded mostly like them, but they were hollow, copies. Or maybe they had always been something else, wearing human appearances like ill-fitting suits. Dad's hands trembled as he reached for the box. The lid wasn't hinged. It lifted straight off. Inside, nestled on dark velvet, wasn't a gift. It was a single, large black candle. Its wax strangely iridescent, shifting like oil on water. There was also a small obsidian knife, sharp and wickedly curved. The blade seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Dad, no," I pleaded, starting to stand up. Instantly, 2 of the other guests, men I vaguely recognized from Dad's bowling league, moved smoothly to flank me, their hands resting lightly on my shoulders. Their touch was cold, impossibly strong, fingers too long and jointed in too many places. I couldn't move. Panic seized me. "It's all right, son. son," Dad said, his voice sounding distant, strained. "It's the only way to keep things balanced, to feed what waits below. It's been this way since your great-grandfather found the door in the woods in 1835, the one that should never have been opened." "Like Mom tried to close it?" I asked, sudden understanding dawning. "That's what happened to her, isn't it? She tried to break the pact." Dad's eyes flashed with grief. "No one breaks the pact. She thought she could substitute herself, offer herself instead of us, but they refused her. They've always wanted our bloodline, the marked ones." His voice dropped to a whisper. "They took her anyway, as punishment." Mr. Henderson produced a match, struck it against the box. The flame flared unnaturally bright in the dimming light filtering through the windows. I noticed with horror that outside, though it should have been early evening, the sky had gone completely black. Not the darkness of night, but a void, starless and absolute. The match's flame cast no shadows despite its brightness. He lit the black candle. It didn't smell like wax, it smelled like ozone, like damp earth, like something metallic and old. The flame wasn't yellow or orange, it burned with a deep violet light that cast long, dancing shadows that moved against the direction of the flame's flicker. The shadows formed shapes on the wall, elongated figures with too many limbs, contorting in what might have been dance or agony. And I remembered something else. Being 5 years old, waking from a nightmare where tall creatures with too many joints danced around my bed. Dad had come in, seen my terror, and shown me his palm. "We see them because of this," he'd said, pointing to his hourglass mark. "We're the only ones who can. That's our burden, our gift." "The offering," Mrs. Gable prompted, her stretched smile wider now, splitting her face unnaturally. As she spoke, I glimpsed something behind her teeth, a darkness, a void similar to the one that had replaced the sky. Dad picked up the obsidian knife. His knuckles were white. He looked down at his own hand, resting on the arm of the chair, at the hourglass birthmark that now pulsed an angry red. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and made a swift, shallow cut across his palm, directly through the mark. I tried to cry out, but the hand on my shoulder tightened, squeezing the air from my lungs. My own birthmark burned in sympathy, the pain spreading up my arm as if my veins were filling with acid. Dad didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. He held his bleeding hand over the candle's violet flame. As the first drop of blood hit the flame, it didn't sizzle. It flared, sending purple sparks into the air that hung suspended, forming momentary constellations of unknown meaning. And the guests, they changed. It wasn't instantaneous, more like a slow motion distortion. Their faces seemed to lengthen, their eyes sinking into shadow, their mouths stretching into impossible, hungry grins filled with too many teeth. The familiar forms flickered, revealing something gaunt, elongated, and wrong underneath. The air grew cold, carrying the scent of decay and something else. Something like stagnant pond water and electricity and time itself gone stale. They weren't human. They had never been human. They began to hum, a low guttural sound that vibrated in my bones. It wasn't music, it was resonance, ancient and terrifying. It was the sound I'd heard in nightmares all my life. The sound I think Mom must have heard the night she disappeared. The sound of something vast and patient, stirring beneath reality. As the humming intensified, I noticed something horrifying. The walls of the living room were becoming transparent, revealing not the expected wooden framework, but a vast, impossible space beyond. A landscape of twisted, impossible geometry, where massive, shadowy forms moved with deliberate purpose around what looked like an enormous door, its surface carved with the same symbols as the wooden box. Through the transparent floor, I could see it wasn't dirt or foundation beneath us, but a chasm that stretched downward forever, pulsing with violet light. And Dad was changing too. The weariness fell away from him. His eyes, fixed on the violet flame, began to glow with the same unnatural light. His skin seemed to tighten over his bones, taking on a grayish, translucent quality. The lines on his face deepened, looking less like wrinkles and more like carved glyphs, forming patterns similar to those on the box. His joints began to shift, bones lengthening and realigning with sickening wet cracks. He wasn't my dad anymore, he was becoming one of them, the vessel being prepared. The blood dripped steadily into the flame, each drop met with a flare and an intensification of the humming. The figures around him swayed, their shadowy forms seeming to draw sustenance from the ritual, from my father's offering, from his transformation. I finally understood understood. This wasn't a birthday party, it was maintenance, a feeding, a renewal of whatever pact Dad had made or inherited or been forced into generations ago. These weren't his friends celebrating his life, they were something else, ensuring their connection, their hold, ensuring the cycle continued. The blood, that's why it had to be exactly 63 years, one drop for each year, sustaining whatever lay beyond that door until the keeper could be properly prepared. And as my birthmark burned hotter, I realized with sickening clarity that I was next. The lineage continues, the hunger must be fed. Something inside me rebelled. This wouldn't be my fate. I wouldn't become whatever Dad was becoming, wouldn't feed whatever ancient thing lurked beneath our family legacy. I thought of Mom, who had tried to save us, who had given herself to protect me from this moment. Terror gave me a surge of adrenaline. I twisted violently, shoving backward against the unyielding grips. One hand slipped just enough. I scrambled, falling over a footstool, kicking out blindly. I connected with something hard, a knee, and heard a sharp crack, followed by a hiss that didn't sound remotely human. The humming stopped. Every elongated head snapped towards me, their glowing eyes filled with cold, ancient malice. The illusion was gone completely now. They were monsters wearing the borrowed skins of my father's acquaintances, skin that now hung loose in places, revealing glimpses of something chitinous and segmented underneath. And the thing in the armchair, the thing that was no longer my father, slowly turned its head. Its eyes burned violet. A low growl rumbled in its chest, but I saw something flicker behind those inhuman eyes. A last remnant of my father, fighting to the surface one final time. "Run," it rasped, the voice gravelly, layered, barely recognizable. "They don't want you yet, but they will. The door in the woods, find it, close it. Your mother found a way, in her journal, under the floorboards in your old room." Its voice contorted into an inhuman shriek as the others turned toward it, their attention momentarily diverted from me. Mom's journal. She'd been trying to break the cycle all along. I didn't need telling twice. I crab walked backwards, scrambled to my feet, and bolted for the kitchen door. The cold hand snatched at me, ripping my sleeve. Something sharp, a claw, raked across my back. I screamed but didn't stop moving. I slammed through the back door, into the suffocating darkness of the woods, not daring to look back. I ran until my lungs burned and tears streamed down my face. Strange whispers followed me through the trees, and more than once I glimpsed thin, impossibly tall figures moving parallel to my path, always just beyond the range of clear sight. The darkness wasn't natural, no stars, no moon, just absolute blackness broken only by brief flashes of violet light that illuminated nothing. Then I saw it, a clearing I'd never noticed before, though I'd played in these woods all my childhood. In the center stood a massive ancient oak tree, its trunk split down the middle, creating a gap that looked almost like a doorway. Inside that gap was only darkness, but it wasn't empty. It moved, pulsed, breathed. The air around it rippled like heat waves, and the smell of ozone was overwhelming. The door in the woods. What great-grandfather had found, what Mom had tried to close. As I approached, I could feel its pull, a gravity that tugged not at my body, but at something deeper, something connected to the mark on my palm. The darkness inside the split trunk seemed to recognize me, to hunger for me specifically. It knew my bloodline, it knew the hourglass mark. It had been waiting. But before I could approach it further, a deafening chorus of those humming voices rose from behind me. I glanced back to see a procession of the elongated figures emerging from the tree line, led by the thing that had been my father. They were coming for me to complete what they'd started, to ensure the lineage continued. I didn't stop until I hit the main road, collapsing onto the asphalt, gasping for air. Above me, the sky was normal again. Dusky evening, stars just beginning to emerge. A car swerved to avoid me, horn blaring. Normal sounds. Normal world. As if a membrane separated this reality from the nightmare I'd just escaped. I called the police from my cell. I told them, I don't even know what I told them. A home invasion, a psychotic break. They sent a cruiser to the house. They found it empty. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no black candle, just leftover roast beef, a half-eaten jello salad, and faded party lights buzzing on the porch. The officer gave me a concerned look as he described the scene, clearly thinking I was having some kind of breakdown. There was one weird thing though, he admitted reluctantly. All the clocks in the house had stopped, every single one showing 6:13 p.m. The exact time Dad had cut his palm. Dad is missing. His friends are unreachable, their numbers disconnected, their home standing empty as if no one had lived there for years. The police think Dad wandered off, maybe had a health episode. They look at me with pity, thinking I'm hysterical from grief and stress. But I know what I saw, I know what they are, and I know that Dad didn't just wander off. He was renewed, prepared for another cycle, transformed into something that serves whatever waits behind that door in the woods. I haven't been back to the house, I can't, but I need to. Mom's journal is there under the floorboards. The answer to breaking the cycle might be in those pages. The answer to saving Dad, if anything of him remains, and maybe even Mom. Sometimes late at night, I think I see movement in the woods behind my own apartment, tall thin shadows flickering between the trees, watching, waiting, patient. I've started keeping track of how many I see each night. Always 63, never more, never less. The hourglass birthmark on my palm has begun to darken, the edges growing more defined each day. Black veins spread from it now, reaching past my wrist. Sometimes I wake up with a taste of ozone in my mouth and dirt under my fingernails, though I haven't left my apartment. Last night, I found a small wooden box outside my door. I didn't open it. I have started researching my family history, looking for clues about this door in the woods Dad mentioned. The librarian gave me an odd look when I requested the county's oldest maps and land surveys. Funny, she said, your father used to research the same things. As she handed me the maps, I noticed something on her palm as her sleeve pulled back, the faintest outline of an hourglass. When she saw me looking, she quickly pulled her sleeve down, but not before I saw the black veins spreading up her arm. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "When's your birthday?" she asked, her voice too light, too casual. I didn't answer. I just took the maps and left. But as I reached the library door, I heard her whisper, "Time is running out for all of us." Back in my apartment, I spread the maps across my kitchen table. The oldest one, dated 1835, showed something that made my blood run cold. The woods behind our house were marked with a symbol, a crude hourglass inside a circle, and scrawled in faded ink at the edge of the map, the confluence, the door, the bargain is made. The same year my great-grandfather supposedly found the door. I don't know what the pact was. I don't know what happens when the cycle is complete. All I know is that my dad's birthday party didn't go as planned. Or maybe it went exactly as they planned all along. Whatever my father became, whatever door he opened or failed to close, I'm afraid the cycle isn't finished. I'm afraid it's just beginning again. With me. Update. I found something in my mailbox this morning. A single black candle and a note in handwriting that isn't quite my father's. The door waits for you. The lineage continues. Happy birthday, son. My birthday isn't for another 6 months, but now I understand. It's not about my calendar birthday, it's about when I was marked, when the hourglass appeared on my palm, 63 days from now. Update 2. I went back to the house last night. I found Mom's journal exactly where Dad said it would be. Most pages are filled with research, historical accounts of disappearances in these woods, astronomical calculations and diagrams of the door, but the last entry stopped mid-sentence. The cycle can be broken if the keeper offers not blood but the rest of the page was torn away, but tucked into the binding of the journal was a photograph I'd never seen before. Mom standing in front of the split oak tree, her hand pressed against the darkness within it. Her eyes were closed in concentration, her lips forming words I couldn't read, and on her palm, visible and clear, an hourglass mark that hadn't been there before. She found a way to take the mark, to become a keeper without being born to it. She tried to break the cycle by transferring it to herself. And now I hear something scratching at my apartment door. The hourglass on my palm is burning. They found me, but they've made one mistake. They left the candle, and I think I know what Mom was trying to write. The cycle can be broken if the keeper offers not blood but fire.
If you enjoyed these stories, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Let me know your thoughts of these stories in the comments below. I frequently talk to my viewers there. But anyways, I hope you were creeped out.
Just kidding. Stay safe.